J'appelle les participants à la table ronde à me rejoindre. C'est encore moi. Voilà, nous, dans une ronde, alors je vais donner les règles du jeu.
We are starting a panel. I've already given the rules for this, and I would like to thank all participants. So we will talk about Europe and all strategies implemented in regions or countries. Everyone will have the opportunity to speak. We're not running late, so I would say for 7 or 8 minutes, and then we would like to have a real exchange with the participants. So how is your name said? Chraye? Okay. So we will start with Mrs. Chraye. So you responsible of clean energy transition for the European Commission. And we would like to start with the European level. We are in Brussels, we have several countries in the room, and several countries have adopted a clean hydrogen strategy. And I would like to know how we can adapt this European strategy at the level of regions and territories. And the floor is yours. You have a microphone here. I think they work, but I'm not sure. Oh yeah, indeed. Thank you and good afternoon. First of all, thank you for inviting me. And I would like to excuse my director who could not be here today. I would like to say that it's very important for me to be here. This region approach is very important for us and we wish to develop it at the European level. And it also gives us the opportunity to speak French, which is pretty rare because in the research field we usually speak English. So yes, we have a hydrogen strategy, and in January we also published a document for the Commission services about the development and implementation of this strategy for research and innovation. So if you haven't read it, please do so because it's pretty short and quite straightforward, which is always rare. We talk about hydrogen valleys, and for us it's a very important tool. So the consequence in terms of energy for short-term and long-term European dependence. We really promote the idea of hydrogen to promote the use and the importation of hydrogen in Europe, but also to just develop a hydrogen ecosystem in Europe. We talk about DG research because when we talk about research, we tend to see very much forward, and we think that we need to develop local tools to use local research and local resources in terms of energy. Each region, each part of the European Union has different conditions, and we need to optimize their use in order to create renewable energy at the local level, but also to transform them in hydrogen and green hydrogen. It's important because it creates ecosystems that can be independent. We call them hydrogen valleys. It helps the economy, it helps facing a crisis. So it's a whole ecosystem that we need to create and develop. And to do so, we need the support of regions. So research can help with the needs assessment, with resource assessment, and then with building a project. research can also fund the adaptation of all this to the local level, but then we need investment. And if we do that, it's because we think that the European Union can really pave the way forward. And then also having a local project helps securing investor, private or public. It's very ambitious, it's true. In 2030, we hope to have 100 valleys across the world. Right now we have 23 and they're not all functional. They are being built at the moment. So for us, it's very important to find fundings at the international level. We have the hydrogen mission that the EU is co-hosting with other countries. And at the international and European level, we want to make it faster, and that isn't possible without the regions. And then there's also something else that I have in my mind regarding the roles of region. We have the platform for research and innovation for regions. Having a hydrogen valley is going to help education in those regions. And it's essential because we don't have enough skills and competencies in the field of hydrogen. So I think you will talk about it, this big project of skills. And we're very happy that the EU funded this Erasmus Plus project to create training programs. And why are we supporting this project? Is because we want this to be shared in all research and training institutes, not only for research purposes, but also for all technicians and all professions linked to hydrogen. And if this could also be possible for to promote gender equality, it would be a good thing, but that's very personal, of course. But you know that gender balance is something very important for the EU. And then the small second thing that I would like to share with you, I would like to refer to a communication made by the EU. The authorities, the national, regional and local authorities often have issues in developing renewable energies, notably for what is linked to permits. And the idea is to really mobilize citizens, because the energy that will be produced is mostly used by the people on the ground, and we want the surplus to go on the grid. And that can help us with many situations that we have at the moment. We want to mobilize citizens so that they are true partners, they can see direct benefits. It's also something that we would like to develop together, and I think that you will see that in the action plan of Repower, that we will also mention this idea of permits and regulatory elements. So I think that my time's up. I could go on forever, but I would just say that I just wanted to say that the hydrogen valleys were developed by our common enterprise on clean hydrogen, and this common enterprise has a platform to help those valleys. And in the new program, we will invest even more in those valleys. Thank you very much for your attention.
Merci, Madame. Merci Madame, vous avez été vraiment très claire sur la place.
Thank you. I think that you've been very clear about what local authorities can do, and I will now give the floor to the chair of Hydrogen Europe Research, Laurent Antoni. You will be telling us how this European network operates. I think that the network has been in place for a few years now, and it is quite powerful. Good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me. Hydrogen Europe Research is an institution that was set up in 2008. Now, what is our purpose? I'd like to come back to what the federal minister said. She spoke of cooperation and innovation. Now, I think that innovation is part of the researchers' DNA, and cooperation is also part of their DNA. As researchers, we are there to exchange, but also to put forward disruptive research, new things. This is part of our DNA, and we are a European network. So we apply the principle based on which 1 + 1 = 3. The idea being to tap into the skills of European partners. And of course, if there is a coordinating body, we will manage to reach 3 when we add 1 + 1. We started with some 10 member countries. We have now 108 members, 50% of universities, 50% of research centers, 21 member states, and 25 in total. So we have expanded, and the purpose is to coordinate the topics on which researchers work. The idea is also to, validate our ideas, but in order to do so, we need to have technological and research infrastructure to build bridges with the industry. So being a European partner allows us to exchange with our brothers and sisters, with Hydrogen Europe Industry, which is our sister organization, so as to make sure that industrial needs on the short, medium, and long term can be heard by the European research community. And we are very grateful to the European Commission for holding a long-term vision. We've been talking about the hydrogen issue for many years, and the European Commission has been supporting programs on hydrogen for some 20 years with a growing envelope, a growing budget year after year. And I think that today we can be proud of what we have achieved in the field of research and industry. Now, of course, we need to go further. We need to first of all, to remain a leader. The chair of the International Energy Agency said that hydrogen can be seen as a marathon, as it is a long-term race. Europe is a leader today, but Europe should remain a leader throughout the marathon, up until the arrival line. So I think that industry has been somehow neglected. So let's make sure that we show our strength in terms of innovation. Let's show that we also have the industrial know-how and the industrial, the knowledge when it comes to industrial transfer. And I think that both the member states and the regions have a role to play. We need to make sure that there is some kind of coordination at every political and regional level. Now, as researchers, because this is part of our DNA, we must be transparent, we must be evidence-based. So we should, of course, publish transparent data, evidence-based data, and with the Fit for 55 package, I think that the European Commission has set clear objectives in line with the COP21 objectives, but at the same time we need to develop our European industry. There's a lot of talk about green hydrogen. Now, perhaps colors do not matter so much. A rainbow is, of course, beautiful, but let's not forget the main environmental objectives and the industrial objectives. So let's use perhaps the terms such as low carbon economy or fossil fuels, the idea being to develop a low carbon hydrogen. And based on the production modes, on the transport modes, on the types of use, we will need to see what is the hydrogen which is fit for purpose. Now, Hélène talked about the skills, the competences. Of course, a researcher does research, but he's also involved in training activities, hence the need to develop a skilled European manpower, skilled technicians, operators, but also engineers. And university training is key, but vocational training, continuous vocational training, or CPD, is also key. We need to have the necessary manpower to operate these huge hydrogen valleys. With France Hydrogen, we drafted a white paper about the types of crafts and professional profiles that we need, and there are many of them, so 10 of them for which there is a shortage of labor. So I think that we needed to take up this challenge both in France but also in Europe. And this is exactly what we try to do, as we know that Europe will need this type of manpower. So this is what we aim at doing at Hydrogen Europe Research. Thank you very much. And this leads me to give the floor to Michel de Paepe, who's the president of BeHyfe, the Belgian Hydrogen Fundamental Expertise Organization. We've been talking about training and research skills. Could you say, perhaps, tell us more about BeHyfe? And if you allow me, I will be switching to English, says the speaker.
So I'm the chairman of the BeHyfe project. Actually, I think I'm here as a kind of an academic example of how things can work. Belgium is a very complex nation. Yes, I live in it, so I know. You can't imagine what happens. But we realized that we have regions in Belgium, and we were talking about the regions and the cooperation between regions. And often in Belgium, it's more easy to cooperate with a neighboring country than with the other side of the country, with the other regions. But still we managed to do so, and that's what we realized. We have a lot of universities and research institutes working on the hydrogen problem, all on different aspects. And we realized that we should bring together these institutes, but not just these institutes, we should bring together the researchers themselves. And I also heard this in the previous comments, we should work on the young people. And also this we realized with the BeHyfe project. And so we brought together, of course, the promoters and the professors. We started talking about subjects that could link every piece of the value chain. And that's an important aspect I want to bring into the discussion. We should not just focus on the result, we should focus on the value chain we need to create. And that value chain, we made a plan on that, and we saw that in every part of the value chain, there was some expert in either the northern or the southern part of Belgium working on that. And so we asked our Minister of Energy to have some funding and to bring them together in a big platform. And we realized 16 PhD students working on different top subjects, working from the very technical things in the chemistry to energy conversion problems and storage and transport, but also on geopolitics and trying to develop the social aspects of the hydrogen problem. So we're looking at the very broad spectrum of everything we have, and that's why I said we should cover the value chain. And of course, we also involved industry. We have an advisory board of industrial partners, and we are lucky in Antwerp, we have one of the biggest clusters for chemistry in the whole of Europe. And this cluster is really in need of a new product, being hydrogen as a basic component, not only for their energy, but mostly as a chemical component. So their demand is very big. They want to convert to a full green chemistry, but for that they need hydrogen. And so we realized this, and we brought them into the project. So we have a lot of companies who will follow up very closely with our students, who are brought together in debates. And we had last week our Hydrogen Week in Antwerp, where these companies were there to see what the first students are doing, how they could help and direct their research. And so that's important. I think we need to look for the results. As you also said, it's not just doing the research, it's looking at the problems that our society is facing, and mostly our industry, which is the basis of our welfare, is facing. We should try to help, as academics, try to solve that problem, and not just work for the fun of the science, which of course, science is fun, but okay. And then the last thing I wanted to bring in, as I said, we're also working on the political part, and we have an agreement with our minister that we also should bring intermediate results to the table. So the moment we have new things, we should report it to industry, so they can use it for new ideas. So they can already plan investments on things that are coming. So they are the first to know, but also our government needs to know that. And so also we try to go into the discussion with our minister, but I think I can offer it to the whole of European experts. Our experts are willing to discuss their ideas and their findings also with the government, so they can make plans, and that they know what is coming and what is possible and what is not possible, because it's always important, I think, to get the right information and to try to avoid fake news in all these kind of things. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Et donc, Fabrice Lemoine, alors on se connaît, on est...
Fabrice, we know each other very well because we went to the same university. So you are responsible, you are in charge of hydrogen at the Lorraine Université, and you are also in charge of the issue of decarbonation. So how do we build bridges between the local, regional and European levels? Well, I think that there is no clear-cut answer. Now, when it comes to the national level, you mentioned France 2030, and France 2030 is a massive investment plan that we used to call Investments for the Future. France has decided to speed up on decarbonated energy with a budget of 7 billion euros, and we have started rolling out some low carbon projects. So we work on the research side to prepare the development of future technologies. Then we also have a project that aims at making technologies more mature, and the idea being to transfer made in France technologies to companies. And then we also work on skill development. As it has been said, we need to develop new skills in the hydrogen sector, as France Hydrogène did it. So all these dimensions are part of one same cluster entitled decarbonated hydrogen, the ambition being to reach 60 gigawatts of electrolysis within 2030. So we operate and advise political policymakers, political bodies. We have huge research institutes that are part of our cluster, the French Research Institute, as well as many universities. The idea being to support national planning in the field of research, and then the National Scientific Research Center, which groups all the hydrogen players in France, and they have they can rely on several types of skills, several types of platforms. Now, of course, working beyond borders is key. We need to have a cross-border projects. We need to involve researchers in these projects. Now, of course, researchers can work on an international level, and for these cross-border projects to be successful, you need to tick several boxes. First of all, you need to build bridges, you need to build relations, and then you also need to find common topics of interest, which is not always easy because well, academic university curricula are not the same from one country to the next, and we not all see energy from the same angle. In France, hydrogen is seen as being produced and fed by power plants, and in France many power plants are fueled by nuclear energy. In Germany, hydrogen is seen as a means of energy storage to guarantee a minimum level of production. So these are two different viewpoints, and we know that in Europe we have common objectives, but we not always reach these objectives in the same manner. But of course, having European policies, it's key. And then the projects have to have an added value for the territory, for the local areas. This is also necessary. Hydrogen can be useful because it helps making energy resources that are captured in a totally different new way. So it crosses the bridge between several ecosystems. And as far as research is concerned, and this was tackled during an event in Strasbourg, it reduces complexity. When you're faced with a systemic issue, you need to mix resources and uses. You need to involve citizens, because, well, there are, of course, inhabitants living there who move, who produce, who travel. So it is a very complex and systemic issue. And the local dimension reduces the complexity, and it also helps us understand how the resource will meet the need and will involve the end users, those inhabitants who are no social hurdles. So working internationally can help us mixing backgrounds, cultures. It will help us see through and identify solution to the systemic issues. In the Lorraine region, we work on the Mosaic project, which means at reducing the use of iron mineral to decarbonate the production of steel, to produce heat, to because we know that a lot of chemistry is based on hydrogen, and to if we are to decarbonate the steel production that emits a lot of CO2, we need to make sure that this hydrogen-based project will be renewable, will be based on local resources. It can also be based on non-renewable resources, but anyway, I would say that we need to transport the hydrogen, and we need to be able to retrofit gas pipelines, but of course we cannot transport hydrogen as we transport methane. There are issues that relate to coating and to other raw materials.
And then it also helps us create economic and social relationships that are kind of new between the territories and the regions, with the German one, for example. And then we can also create new opportunities on the economic level. And so the hydrogen network is going to help us build economic relationships. And so research, project development, territorying will help us create economic relationships, as I've said, and new governance models across borders that are quite interesting and that we need to create as well. So the regions, besides technological innovations, that can also help us create more social initiatives. We talked about involvement,
les citoyens dans les projets, embarquer les parties prenantes.
and I think
Donc des industriels, évidemment,
involves
des élus, il y a de la gouvernance, donc la société civile, pour
all the stakeholders, so that we need to talk about the acceptability of a project, but also to co-construct it, to make it positive, and to transform the industrial opportunity into a more systemic one for the territories and the regions, where we can take into account the resilience aspect. Fabrice, your time is up now. Okay, now we have another exercise. So as we've said, we have many stakeholders here from the industrial world, from academia, and I will thank the first person asking a question. Yes, sir. And please introduce yourself as well. So for questions, we should have a microphone on both sides of the room so that everyone can hear it and the question can be interpreted as well. That's also something that we inherited from the pandemic, I think. I think that microphones turn on automatically, or almost. I think you can go ahead. So I'm Benoit, and I work as a strategy officer in France. It's a business that we also make work at the international level. And my question is the following, if it works. Well, thank you to our technicians. Thank you very much. Okay, so my name is Benoit Confet, and I work for a consulting firm implanted in France, but working in the international level. My question will mention elements that Mr. Antoni talked about, but it's a question for everyone, basically. You've talked about 85 professions and 17 that are in a stressed situation. Today, when we talk about energy, I will talk even further than just hydrogen. When we talk about energy strategies, we'll also talk about reconverting some territories. If we go to Dunkirk, for example, we see that there is a remodelization of industrial plants, of existing production and consumption models. Is the transition already in place to really help those professions with transition professions with former skills that were linked to fossil energies to skills that we will need for hydrogen and renewable energies? Thank you. Yes, obviously. So this is why when I talked about this training part is mostly about skills. What are the skills and the professions that we will need? And this is based on those skills that we identified, those 85 professions. And in the hydrogen field, we often think that hydrogen equals chemistry and electricity, but it's way more than that. We also have electronics, power, mechanics, and so we have many jobs that are also declining in the industry at the moment. And so it's a very good thing to have young people. They are very dynamic, they bring new things, but we also need to think about the people that are already there with an experience, with many years of background. And so to answer your question, yes, it's part of the reflection. And that's also why we talk about continuous vocational training and not just initial training. It's one of the aspects of this Erasmus Plus project. It's to identify at the European level all the skills needed and then organize trainings for young people, but also for adults. And in France, we signed an agreement with a training institute for adults to go in that direction. Hydrogen valleys, hydrogen ecosystem, depending on the region where we will be, we will have more skills in some part, but we might have more skills for producing or for using hydrogen, and we will need to take all of that into account. And on the European level, we've been talking about that with the Smart Specialization platform, where some French, Dutch and Spanish regions were the leaders, but now we have more than 50 regions working together, collaborating. Some will produce, others will use, some will do both, or maybe transport hydrogen. And so the transport issue is becoming very important as well. Ms. Chraye, do you want to say more on this? Yes, a few information elements here. So in the framework of our regional program, we finance a pilot project for carbon-intensive regions that will need at the industrial level or for energy resources, will need to accelerate their transition to cleaner energy. So that's a first element. It's very important because we can't leave those regions behind. And obviously, giving up some activities in those regions will lead to very serious social issues. I would like to mention another example in Portugal with a big industry that use hard hydrocarbons and then fossil fuels, and now it's transitioning to hydrogen with research institutes as well in regions that really depended on this industry and other activities. So it's a positive example. And I've talked about the role of regions for hydrogen valleys, but we will also have regions that will produce hydrogen to export it. And then we also have ports, and the Repower EU project also gives a very big importance to ports, because we will not produce enough hydrogen in the EU. We will need to import some of it. As a university president, I would like to give more information. We have various models and we have been able to adapt, but obviously we need more jobs. And for the moment, it's not the case yet. We now have very specialized trainings, and we have not yet seen modules allowing for continuous trainings. Now we are starting with specializations. Now we can do those trainings if we know exactly what we need to do. And maybe the idea here is to really have a coherent idea in a specific field. In France, we are also developing education and trainings, and we have various models of continuous training, for example, that can be a good idea at the beginning of the career, but also for people who are already employed that can go back to university to learn new things, new skills. So I think trainings, we have them available. They are continuously evolving. I think it's the same in Belgium. But the problem is that we need jobs that correspond to those new skills. And it's true, we probably have some jobs that are on the decline, but what's the specialty, what the specificity is that the elements are not quite clear all the time. Yes, so that's one of the activities that we have in France Hydrogen. Even if I said, okay, I don't like colors, we can talk about the colors of the various hydrogen jobs. What is the level of expertise in the hydrogen field? So that's something we're doing at the moment to be able to identify the skills that we need. We say that we need some jobs, but what we see is that we already have some of them with the plants that are being built now. Well, not as much as we would like, but already the first businesses struggle to hire new people. So the jobs, they're already there, they're already available. Okay, so just one thing and then I will give you the floor. So I think there will be a tension within companies, because we also have the electricity focused mechanic field, and so I think that will also lead to many tensions. But I think that we will have struggles for professionals, because we might have a shortage of jobs actually for those people. So yes, I confirm emerging businesses struggle hiring new people in the hydrogen field. But I think that hydrogen will also generate jobs, because it will allow building bridges between various sectors, the electricity sector, the gas sector. We've seen that already in the past, decarbonizing a steel plant in Dunkirk, for example, and we have seen also the coupling of various gigawatts of electricity. So this is also the perfect opportunity to redesign our training programs, to have basic skills and more specific ones. So it's going to be a huge opportunity in terms of trainings and skills.
It's a problem of the technical skills you need at the basic level too. A lot of experts now working on methane combustion, let's say natural gas combustion. They know the safety rules and stuff like that. These same things will have to be applied for hydrogen people, and we see the same competition with everything that's happening in the heat pump market, where you need refrigerant specialists converting from plumbers to people who know the F-gas regulation. So it's a common challenge. So I think there we should partner up. And I see, for example, in the port of Antwerp, they already start to convert people, and they start to invest in setting up these systems where people can get this new training. And also in ArcelorMittal, in the steel plant in Ghent, you see the conversion towards the new hydrogen strategy is already happening. There are a pilot plant, and also there they are focusing a lot on training the basic workforce to get in that system. So the industry realizes it, but the big problem is we don't find young people doing technical studies. That's the most important thing. It's a message that our politicians and our industry should convey. We need more technical skills in our society, not just the social skills. And that's something that has shifted over the years, and I think it's time now to shift back.
Okay, thank you very much. Une autre question, monsieur?
Okay, thank you very much. Another question. If you don't mind, please just go to the microphone over there.
Other people can have the translation if they need. We have the same technical problem on the other side.
Telling that you need technicians.
Yes, but they're good.
Well, my name is, it's okay now?
Yes, it's okay.
My name is Ruben Vartapetian. I am from the European Center for Knowledge and Technology Transfer here in Brussels. So my question is simple. We have many words for hydrogen. White hydrogen, blue hydrogen, clean hydrogen, and even Mr. Paepe mentioned now natural hydrogen. And I know one professor in Kiev, Ukraine, who calls natural hydrogen the hydrogen which is under the ground in deep kilometers, which is coming up. And in Africa, in Mali, there is a village which is using this natural hydrogen energy for every need. So my question is basically to all of you, and also especially Mr. Antoni and Mr. Paepe, if this type of hydrogen is in the field of your interests.
So, we want to start, or to know, because it's.
So, thank you very much for the question. I can answer to the question in English, or you prefer in French?
I prefer that you do in French, because
you
people
have the
have the
translation.
translation.
Okay. So, je crois que l'hydrogène natif.
I think that natural hydrogen is part of the current research. At the moment, we're not talking about mass use of this. We're more talking about research, being able to detect the sources, use them, exploit them. So it's part of the research programs. I don't know if it's part of the Hydrogen Europe programs, but as far as the French research plan is concerned, we will have a call for projects about natural hydrogen and underground storage of hydrogen. So now I think we're mostly at the research stage.
A call. You call your French university, or who will be organizing?
Oui, l'appel sera sur la stratégie nationale.
Yes, for the French hydrogen strategy.
It's true. It's at the moment fully in a research state, so it's all research and writing papers and doing the analysis. There was a very interesting paper of a colleague of mine who also works for ENGIE. He's also a professor in energy at our faculty. And he wrote a paper about the natural hydrogen and the possibilities, and also the challenges like mining it, storing it. So, but also the supply will be limited. So it's not a silver bullet. We need everything. And so the production of hydrogen from electricity, from green electricity, will be, of course, necessary. And there, I think, the biggest potential is in the countries where the sun is abundantly shining. And we have, as Europe, to negotiate with them and make partnerships which are sustainable to import this hydrogen for our industry. I think this is a way to go. And the natural hydrogen can be one of the sources, but at the moment it looks like it's only a limited source and it will never supply everything we need. That's one of the challenges we face. We don't want to lose our comfort, and we don't want to lose our industry. So we have to be very careful that we make sure that the transition is sustainable in the end.
Thank you. Monsieur Antoni.
Alors oui, je voudrais juste réagir en disant effectivement que
Thank you. Indeed, natural hydrogen is not part of the strategic agenda of the common enterprise. It has not been integrated as one of the directions to consider in the framework of that program, except if we see very convincing and promises progress in that field, but it's not the case yet. And when I hear some big companies that know a lot about mining, most of them are very skeptics when it comes to mining hydrogen. Not that there isn't any of it, but it's quite complicated, it's quite limited. We have very unknown regions that we need to mine. We need to create all the infrastructure to mine it, to store it, to transport it, and then we also need sometimes to purify it, to have the appropriate filters. So it all depends of the components of the specific hydrogen. It remains a very big challenge. I think that today we need to have a bigger production of hydrogen, and I think that at the moment it's we need to focus on electricity. So we have a growing budget, but it's not indefinite either. We have doubled our challenge to go from 10 to 20 tons of renewable hydrogen. So first of all, we will focus on what will help us make the production bigger. So why not? But it's not one of the priorities that we chose to tackle the climate urgency that we face today.
Il y a le challenge d'exploration.
So there is the mining challenge, the technological challenge, but also society's challenge. Because when it comes to extracting, when it comes to removing, withdrawing, whatever the mineral, if you work on geothermics in the eastern part of Europe,
Pouvait être compliqué. Et puis là, on est...
and in the eastern part of France, we have very deep drillings that we are not used to and whose impact is quite unknown. We are still just at the beginning.
Monsieur?
Any other questions, sir?
Oui, bonjour à tous. Nicolas Quiromès de l'Université de Lorraine, projet Dynamise.
Good afternoon. I come from the Lorraine University, and I'd like to make sure that we will not have any competition between locally sourced hydrogen and imported hydrogen. Now, I've seen that the European Commission is looking into such regulation, market regulation. Now, first of all, in the Repower EU program, the objective is to double our hydrogen production, and we won't get there if we only tap into locally sourced hydrogen. However, our purpose is not to see colonies proliferating for Europe to import hydrogen. We just want to help those countries that have the right resources in producing renewable hydrogen to meet their own needs. And in this way, these countries will accelerate the transition to a clean hydrogen. I think that Europe only accounts for 12% of carbon emissions. I'm not very good at figures, but this is, I think, the right figure, 12%. So we will help these countries producing renewable hydrogen and renewable energy to meet their own needs, and then they might, if needed, export the surplus. We do not want to cause deforestation by helping these countries produce renewable hydrogen. We have to reach a win-win situation. Now, if we produce a green and renewable hydrogen in a country located outside the EU, and if this hydrogen is imported by Europe, such imports have to be green. I do not see how we could import in methane containers that would in turn contain oil components. We want to stay away from greenwashing, so the whole supply chain and the whole transport chain has to be clean. Now, I think that there are two constraints. These hydrogen-fueled ships, well, there are too few of them, and there are no international standards, which means that we must speed up the standardization process. And such standardization has to meet various types of needs. We are not going to standardize only for ships. We need to make sure that these standards will be compatible. We do not want to end up having in one harbor a refueling system for ships, but not for lorries that will need to transport the goods unloaded from the ships. So we need to guarantee this compatibility throughout the supply chain. So I think that standardization is key, both here in Europe but also internationally. If a country wants to export and then does not meet the European standards, we would be in trouble. So I think that standardization is the current, or has to be the current priority. Now, as I've said, the whole chain has to be renewable, and we need to end with a win-win situation. Exporting countries should also be helped in making this energy transition. Thank you for your excellent question. I agree with what has been said. A fair and just transition is what we want. If we want to favor renewable hydrogen in African countries, for instance, it has to help them decarbonating their network, because sometimes these countries not even have access to electricity, and many of them are off-grid, or many areas are off-grid. Now, economic studies show that transporting hydrogen on ships might increase the cost by at least $4 per kilo. So one needs to take into account the cost of transporting hydrogen. Now, it might be more profitable to produce locally sourced hydrogen, but it is also more profitable for the climate. Hence the need for standards that will take it into account the whole life cycle and avoid any greenwashing or one-shot protocols. So we need to take into account the whole life cycle when it comes to production, transport, packaging, hydrogen will need to be liquefied and then transported to the end user. So we will need to add all the greenhouse gas emissions of this chain. And based on these calculations, we will have an idea of the cost, of the environmental footprint, and then it will be up to users to make their choice. And as I said earlier, a researcher has to be transparent and show that results are replicable. Now, within the International Hydrogen Partnership, we have already published a first report on how the carbon footprint should be calculated throughout the value chain. And then, based on that, we will be able to elaborate certificate. In December 2020, China produced a standard and stated that when hydrogen releases less than 14.5 kilograms of CO2, it is deemed as green. The number equals to 10 in Europe. But China claims that its hydrogen is clean when it releases then less than 14.5 kilos of CO2. And so the standard between China and Europe is not the same, and this could lead to unfair competition if not all countries are on the same line. Now, if you take into account the costs and the environmental footprint, then perhaps locally sourced hydrogen has all its chances and could be part of our energy mix. Yes. Madam?
Nuclear society. And my question is, what about the hydrogen produced by nuclear? We know that to produce hydrogen and just generally the entire energy transition should be based on the low carbon technologies and as economical as possible. So my question is about the nuclear.
Alors, je vais me retourner vers Fabrice ou vers Monsieur Antoni, parce que je crois que c'est une question aussi très française par rapport au...
I think that this is a very Franco-French issue because we know that France relies a lot on nuclear plants. Now, as you know, I also work in the field of atomic and nuclear energy, but also in the field of hydrogen. And I would say that there is no competition between the two. The question is how much CO2 has been released when producing hydrogen. I think this is the right question to ask ourselves. If we are to fight climate change, this is the question that we need to ask ourselves. There might be other social or economic challenges, but if we look at the IPCC figures, we know that producing hydrogen from nuclear plants will release as much CO2 as hydrogen produced from wind power energy. So I have nothing against solar energy, but you will release more CO2 than by using nuclear plants. So I think we shouldn't oppose nuclear energy and hydrogen. Of course, they all need two different types of decisions, different choices operated by society, but we all pursue the same objectives, though we do not take the same path to reach these common objectives. Mrs. de Chraye, I will hand over to you. I know that if we look at the German or a French strategy, we do see that nuclear plants can be used to produce the hydrogen. Germany has not made the same decision. So there are in some cases conflicting choices very different choices based on the country that you look at. Now, in some fields, the EU is sovereign to decide, and not in all fields is. But when it comes to energy, the choices have to be made by the countries themselves. I was referring to hydrogen valleys, but I was referring to the sources. It is not up to the EU to tell each and every country what resources they need to use. We are only there to determine the common decarbonation and climate protection objectives that, of course, depend on several decisions. But these decisions, the way countries comply with national or international constraints, this is part of the country's own competences. But France is not alone and does not work remotely. Well, does not work on a does not work alone, and perhaps the needs in terms of hydrogen vary from one country to another, and perhaps the demand is not the same. So I think it will be up to the member states to make their decisions. The idea is not to say, yes, this energy is okay, this other energy is not okay. The purpose is to fight climate change while meeting the needs and demand of the European population. If there is no one last question, I will ask each of you to take a minute to, based on the strategic plans of each country, tell us whether or not we will be able to reach the decarbonation objectives, or whether we will need to make them less ambitious. We gave this figure of 2 gigawatts per kilo. Are we fast enough? We're never fast enough, but if we can move faster, all the better. Now, what I'm very uncomfortable with is that there are huge research projects, huge toolboxes, but we need to make them come true and more practical. Very often in Europe, we work in isolation, and we also work in isolation technically speaking. There are countries that work throughout, that work in cooperation throughout the whole supply chain. I think that financially speaking, but also in terms of testing, technological infrastructure, support to innovation, it's not always a matter of money, it's also a matter of technical means, and perhaps we need to speed up this technical process and be more united and act together. Now, we try to implement European synergies, and I would like to say that we need to speed up research activities. Very often we're told you've done enough research, you need to accelerate the pace of industrialization. Now, if you want to reach the final line of the marathon, you need to increase research investments. We need to improve the quality and the range of our products. We need to do more upselling, but we also need to prepare the next generations. And I think that we need to increase the research budget both within the EU but also in every member state. So it's a good idea to work together as we are doing here today by adding up European efforts. I think that member states will be more easily on the same line and will speed up their pace to reach the industrial and climate objectives.
I already said it. I think we should work together with industry, and the first thing we should do in Europe is bring all the expertise together. There's a lot of spread around expertise in different research institutes, all focusing on their own publications and trying to publish what they know, but there's no collaboration. So we should try to bring them together, but not only the researchers, also the industry, and really show the questions that industry has, and then try to get an answer to it, and not a long-term answer, not something that is a PhD of another 4 years. And that's the other thing I said in the BeHyfe project. We really want to bring intermediate results to our partners and show it immediately when we have something or we are on a new track to see what the next steps are. And I think we have a nice example. The COVID crisis was managed like that from a scientific point of view. There were pre-publications, there were tests running, and everything was open science. So we could see what is happening in Israel and the rest of the world, what are the results. And from that we developed the vaccines, and from that we developed our things. So I think this kind of attitude to change in science, and it's against my own habit, because I'm used to writing scientific papers and publish them. But we should have more pre-releases of what we know so we can work together on this problem.
Sharing expertise and yeah. Fabrice, 1 minute.
Oui, merci.
What about you, Fabrice? Well, I agree. We need to speed up research, but we also need to speed up the way we use hydrogen. I'm thinking about decarbonated hydrogen in the chemical sector, where we need hydrogen to manufacture ammonia, which is used for fertilizers. So we need to enhance ammonia and use more hydrogen to manufacture ammonia. So this is what we need to speed up. We need to develop what we call chemicals, electrically based components, and then we also need to develop methanol, and then other plastic materials. So we need, on the one hand, to speed up research to build these electricity-based process and electricity-based hydrogen, and then we need to develop the different industrial sectors that rely on hydrogen. So research on the one hand and uses development on the other.
I just give my opinion. I think that in 10 years' time we will have met our objectives if in the general public hydrogen has become a reality, which is not the case today. I was looking at some media titles that are wondering if hydrogen is the future carbon or the future electricity, a future coal. And so it's a very misunderstood concept in the general public. And so I think that at some point, and it's what we were saying, people will need to see how beneficial this change is. And so we're talking a lot about 2030. So if 8 years' time we have reached this objective, then I think we would have succeeded. So thank you very much for your questions and your attention.